So, Linda, thank you so much for taking the time today of being a part of our community practice channel here on YouTube. And on behalf of SETI, I want to thank you so much for your leadership today.
Great. Nice to participate.
Right, awesome. So, as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers. Tell us about your amazing work.
Thank you. Yes, well, I have been working in the sector for about 50 years now. And I started out with the organization Imagine Canada, but at the time it was called the Canadian Centre for Philanthropy, and there were three of us at the time. And we worked on developing a campaign called Imagine. And the intent of the campaign was to encourage individuals to give more time and resources to nonprofit sectors, as well as the corporations. So we ran that campaign for about 5 years, really hoping to shift people's views about the role they could be playing in terms of contributing to the sector. And then I was the CEO of Imagine Canada. And from there, when I left there, I had a consulting practice for a bunch of years working in governance, strategic planning, and so on. And then my husband and I started a foundation called Ignite NPS. And the intent is to ignite new and different ways of working in the sector. So that's what has led me to where I am now.
Okay, awesome. So please continue, like what inspired you, also, any ups and downs, things like that, if you get more in detail for us.
Yes, well, it was interesting because working in the sector that long, you really have a chance to see some pretty significant shifts. And the interesting part, perhaps, is that the sector, when I first started, was quite different. It was a much simpler set of models, um, and um, and I've watched it really evolve and change quite dramatically. And I would say these times, the last, let's call them 5, 10 years, have been more profound, the shifts I've seen, than all the other 40 years I've seen in the sector. And so I think that has been interesting to watch. One of the things that I found in my practice, my practice, consulting practice, was that I was working with a lot of organizations talking about strategic planning, encouraging boards to make strategic decisions. And I kind of had the insight that I'm not sure this model of board governance is working for the sector. Um, and and so as a consultant, became kind of frustrated because I felt I was working with a model that I didn't really think was working well anymore. So one of the things that when we started the foundation, I became involved in co-leading with ONN something called the Reimagining Governance Lab, and it's a set of resources and tools, all free, that anybody can access around governance. And what we tried to do with that is to encourage get people to sort of think beyond this, what is kind of this box that we call the board, that's not very fluid. So whoever you can get on the board, whoever you can recruit on the board are the people that are having to do everything from figuring out the details, are we meeting our regulatory requirements, right through to making very tough strategic decisions and having to be visionary. So one of the things that we try to do in the lab is to say, let's let's get rid of this rigid boundary we call the board, and really think about how it could work much more collaboratively with a broader network of people. And so it was interesting working in the project because we were up against a frame of mind of people saying, yes, but we as the board have all these legal and regulatory requirements we have to meet almost in a panicked way. And so we can't do innovative things in terms of how we work as a board and so on. So we published something that said, all right, here's the board essentials. Here's what the board must do that is required by law. And at the end of the day, it's interesting because there isn't that much you need to do in that area. So that opens up all kinds of opportunities for people to work in different ways. And one thing that has been sort of a challenge for us is finding models of organizations that are actually doing their governance work differently. Thinking about governance not just being about the board, but it could be a much broader network. So that's something that we worked on in terms of that project. And some of the challenges we're up against. So it's on the Ontario Nonprofit Network. You can go there and find it. The other thing that I found really interesting is back 30 years ago or so, I remember running sessions, workshops on competitive advantage, how organizations can position themselves competitively in the marketplace. And I think that was an important thing to do at the time. But now with the environment, seeing this vastly different environment, I think this whole notion of working competitively is starting to break down. And so what we recognized is there are a lot of tools out there that talk about how to do collaboration, including one that I developed with some colleagues called that is available on my website. And the but what we found was at the end of the day, there are people sitting around the table working on collaborations. And behind each and every one of them is an organization. And if those organizations themselves aren't built to be collaborative or haven't set the processes in place or structures to allow them to be the best collaborators, the collaboration's not going to do well. So we worked, I approached the Tamarack Institute and said, would you think about working on a website, again, with resources and tools, all free, called the Collaborative Organization, where we actually focus on the organization itself and what it needs to have in place to be truly collaborative. Everything from, do you have the right kind of enabling culture to be collaborative, and what does that even look like, through to what kind of board policy do you need to put in place? How do you manage risk? And how do you assess and determine where should we get involved? And should we continue a collaboration or should we exit a collaboration? So all those tools are available on that site called the Collaborative Organization. So I'd say if I look at some of the challenges that I've worked on, both personally, because in my practice, I was up against often organizations that I felt weren't working in terms of governance to their full potential, and I did not feel that they were really set up to be collaborative, working those challenges. So I've had this wonderful opportunity to be able to co-create some resources to help meet those challenges.
That's beautiful. And I know definitely what you're saying, because here at SETI, that's our biggest thing is collaboration, and we know that it's the key to social changes. And it's not a one man army or a one man show, and There's even an African proverb: if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. Right? So these are the things that we hold very dear to us, and just having this conversation and doing these interviews it shows right there that like-minded, so it's really collaborating with like-minded people who are on the same frequency, that are looking for the best outcome, and you know putting thoughts into action, that's really going to get that communal result. So I definitely understand what you're saying. And so if I was to ask you, how do you feel about the future? How does the future look for just social impact in a whole?
I am very, very, very positive about the future. And the reason is, I think nonprofit organizations, their leadership is the organizations are incredibly resilient and and innovative too, because at the end of the day, if you're working in a nonprofit organization, every single day as leaders, you have to be innovative because you're constantly facing way more need than the resources to do it. So I am really positive. I also am positive about the fact that we're watching these new models emerge. We're talking about the very thing that you and I are talking about today, and not just as a revolutionary thought, but increasingly as a way to think. It's becoming more and more natural for sector leaders, I think, to talk about these sort of things. So I'm very positive. I think the sector will pivot. I do believe we will probably see fewer organizations as we go into the future. Um, Sometimes I've I've thought we can never have too many causes, but can we have too many organizations? And so by that, I think the we never want to lose that enthusiasm, the passion that comes with people who are creating these causes. But I do think we're watching models emerge in more and more, and people getting more and more comfortable with them. This idea of shared platforms, shared back office. I would like to see shared fundraising happening, campaigns, um, with this idea of working collaboratively. And so I think that is what is going to, at the core, make the difference for the sector. But boards and leadership in nonprofit organizations need to break out of the notion that they are required to meet all kinds of obligations in terms of their governance and just come at it a lot more creatively. So I'm very positive.
That's awesome. I like your perspective on that, because, and I know that the future, this generation, the Gen Zs and forward, will appreciate that out of the box mentality, because it's so needed, because it's just naturally kind of blossoming that way, you know?
Yes, I agree with you. I think there's a
Mhm.
difference, very much a difference in terms of mindset.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely welcoming. And so you know what, I would say, what does success look like to you? And yeah, if you give me, what does success look like to you moving forward?
Well, I guess if the question is what does success look for me personally, it's that the Ignite NPS Foundation and its contributions and my co-leadership of various initiatives really start to ignite new ways of doing things. That I would be really feel I'd achieved success with that. And so that's kind of what I'm working towards, and getting the uptake on some of these things, and being able to see real change happen as a result. The stories that come back to me sometimes about people who've used various tools or resources on our Reimagining Governance Lab or the collaborative organization, although that's just recently released, stories that come back that say, we really shifted the way we started to talk about governance, or we started to think about collaboration. Those stories really warm my heart and make me continue to want to um, uh, be a part of the shift and the change.
Exactly. That's awesome. Well, Linda, this has been very, very it was a fun conversation because it lets me foresee a lighter sector. Like you said, there's could have many causes, but I think the many causes could be solution based,
Yeah,
where that it can be reduced because
yeah,
the collaboration of food, clothing, and shelter, of course, they all go hand in hand. So of course there should be a merging of that. That should be just one. That's how we live on this planet. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be because here, different org there, different org kind of splitting it apart. It should be fused into one. And how can we help human beings have food, clothes, and shelter and live as peaceful and cohesively as we can on this planet? So I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And so my last question for you is just leave your closing thoughts, your calls to action moving forward. And I actually forgot to ask you just one, if there's anything new. So maybe leave your contact, anything new you're working on, and your closing thoughts.
Thanks. I think what you are doing is extraordinary and important work. So thrilled to have this conversation, because I think 10 years ago, I'm not sure we'd be having this conversation, because people wouldn't have be talking about these things in the way that they are now. So I appreciate that. I would encourage people to go to my website, which is just put in Ignite NPS. And there are all kinds of resources on it and the things that I've been working on over the years. So I encourage people to go to that site, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. It's been fun.
Absolutely, it definitely is. And we thank you for leaving that information. We thank you for the leadership and, much success and much health, much mental health, physical health to you. And we'll definitely be collaborating in the near future. So we will we will close the way that we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Linda, once again, on behalf of Setia and myself, I thank you so much for your wisdom, and we'll definitely be in contact and do some collaboration in the near future.
Thank you. Nice to
All
meet you.
right.
Take
Okay.
care.
You enjoy yourself. Take care.
All right.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye, dear.